Welcome back to Gunners Daily, your home of Arsenal news. If you truly love Arsenal, make sure you subscribe, join the family. Arsenal have reportedly made an opening bid for Newcastle United captain Bruno Guimaraes, but that first offer has been rejected by Newcastle. However, this rejection does not necessarily mean the end of Arsenal's interest. In fact, the situation could be just getting started, because there are now reportedly direct lines of communication between Arsenal and Newcastle over the Brazilian midfielder. So, what exactly is happening between the two Premier League clubs? Why have Newcastle rejected Arsenal's first proposal? How much could Bruno Guimaraes cost? And perhaps most importantly, does the Newcastle captain actually want to move to the Emirates this summer? Let's break down everything you need to know. According to the information in this report, Arsenal have made their first move for Bruno Guimaraes, but Newcastle have immediately knocked back the opening proposal. At this stage, the exact value of Arsenal's initial offer has not been made clear in the report. But what is clear is that there is a significant difference between how Arsenal value the midfielder and how Newcastle value their captain. Newcastle are obviously under no pressure to simply give away one of their most important players. Guimaraes has become one of the key figures at St James's Park since joining Newcastle from Lyon in January 2022 for around £40 million. Since arriving in England, the Brazilian has developed into a top Premier League midfielder and has also become the captain of Newcastle. He has made 195 appearances for the club and has scored 31 goals, which shows just how important he has become to the team. For Arsenal, the attraction is very easy to understand. Mikel Arteta wants to build a squad capable of competing for the biggest trophies, and that requires quality in every area of the pitch. Bruno Guimaraes is the type of midfielder who can offer Arsenal several different qualities. He is technically strong, comfortable receiving the ball under pressure, capable of progressing possession, and experienced in the physical demands of Premier League football. He can also contribute defensively while helping his team control matches through possession. For a manager like Arteta, having a midfielder with that combination of technical ability, intelligence, physicality, and experience could be extremely valuable. Arsenal already have excellent midfield options, but adding a player of Guimaraes' level would increase competition and give Arteta another important option when the team is facing a long and demanding season. And this is why the rejection of Arsenal's opening bid is not necessarily a surprise. Newcastle know exactly what they have in Bruno Guimaraes. He is not just another squad player who can easily be replaced. He is the club captain and one of the most recognisable players in their team. Newcastle supporters have built a strong connection with him, and the club have every reason to try to keep him at St James's Park. Therefore, if Arsenal want to take him away from Newcastle, they are going to have to convince the club financially. The report indicates that there is a significant difference in valuation between the two clubs, meaning Arsenal's first offer was not enough to make Newcastle consider selling their captain. This could now force Arsenal to decide whether they are willing to return with a significantly improved proposal. But there is another part of this story that Arsenal supporters will be watching very closely, and that is Bruno Guimaraes' own position. The report suggests that the Brazilian midfielder is keen on the possibility of moving from Newcastle to Arsenal this summer. If that is accurate, it could become a very important factor in the negotiations. When a player is happy at his current club, negotiations can sometimes be easier for the selling club because there is no pressure from the player. But when a player becomes interested in another opportunity, the situation can become much more complicated. Guimaraes is already an established Premier League player, he is a captain, and he has international experience with Brazil. Moving to Arsenal could give him the opportunity to compete for major trophies while also remaining in the Premier League. There is also the issue of European football. Newcastle finished 12th in the Premier League last season, which means they will not be able to offer Guimaraes European football in the upcoming campaign. Arsenal, on the other hand, are competing at the highest level and have ambitions of challenging for major honours. From the player's perspective, that difference could potentially be significant. A footballer at Guimaraes' level will naturally want to compete in the biggest competitions and challenge for trophies. Arsenal can offer that ambition, and that could make the Emirates an attractive destination if the Brazilian decides that he wants a new challenge. However, Arsenal should not expect Newcastle to make the transfer easy. Newcastle have already experienced significant changes this summer, and according to the report, the club have already lost important players, including Anthony Gordon and Sandro Tonali, who have moved to Barcelona and Tottenham respectively. Losing another major first-team player, especially the club captain, would be a huge decision. Newcastle will therefore want to make sure that if Guimaraes does leave, they receive the kind of financial package that allows them to replace him and strengthen other areas of the squad. This is one of the reasons why Newcastle have rejected Arsenal's first bid rather than immediately accepting negotiations on Arsenal's terms. Newcastle will also be hoping to avoid another situation similar to the Alexander Isak saga from last summer. Isak's departure became one of the biggest transfer stories in English football, eventually ending with the Swedish striker moving to Liverpool for a reported British record £125 million fee. Newcastle will obviously not want another major transfer saga involving one of their biggest stars. However, the report suggests that a repeat of that situation with Guimaraes appears unlikely. The midfielder is expected to join his Newcastle teammates for pre-season preparations, meaning that, for the moment, he remains part of the Newcastle squad. That could give the club time to assess the situation and determine whether Arsenal are willing to meet their financial demands. Guimaraes is reportedly scheduled to join his Newcastle teammates at their pre-season training camp in La Manga after receiving an extended break following his international commitments with Brazil. This is another interesting detail because the transfer situation could continue developing while the player is preparing for the new season. If Arsenal return with another proposal, Newcastle will have to decide whether to continue rejecting offers or whether a certain figure would be enough to convince them to sell. And if Guimaraes makes his own position clearer, that could add another layer to the negotiations. At the same time, Newcastle are going through a period of major change. The club have been active in the transfer market, and according to the report, Lucas Hornacek has become their fifth summer signing, joining players such as Ewan Jowan, Bazumana Toure, Sean Stour, and Alaji Bamba. So Newcastle are clearly trying to reshape their squad. But there is another major issue surrounding the club. They are currently without a head coach following Eddie Howe's departure. German coach Matthias Geisel is understood to be close to becoming the new Newcastle manager. Whoever takes charge could have an important role in the future of Bruno Guimaraes. A new manager may want to build the midfield around the Brazilian, or the club could potentially decide that a huge transfer fee would give them the resources to rebuild the squad in a different way. From Arsenal's perspective, however, this is about more than simply signing another midfielder. The Gunners are trying to build a squad capable of competing consistently at the highest level. Arsenal have made significant progress under Mikel Arteta, but the demands of competing for trophies mean the manager needs quality and depth throughout the squad. Injuries, suspensions, fixture congestion and the number of competitions can quickly expose weaknesses. A player like Guimaraes would give Arteta another high-level option and could potentially allow him to change the way Arsenal approach certain matches. His Premier League experience would also mean that Arsenal would not have to wait for him to adapt to the speed and physicality of English football. Imagine an Arsenal midfield with Declan Rice and Bruno Guimaraes available for different tactical situations. There could be matches where Arteta wants more defensive security, games where he wants greater control of possession, or situations where he needs experienced players who can handle pressure. Guimaraes' ability to play different roles could give Arsenal more flexibility. Of course, this does not mean that a transfer is guaranteed. Arsenal would still need to agree a fee with Newcastle, and Newcastle's valuation could become the biggest obstacle. And Bruno Guimaraes is not the only major name being associated with Arsenal this summer. The Gunners have also been linked with Real Madrid superstar Vinicius Jr. That shows the level of ambition surrounding Arsenal's transfer plans. The club are looking to strengthen their squad and compete at the very highest level. But major transfers come with major financial demands, and Arsenal will have to make careful decisions about where they invest their money. If the club are serious about Guimaraes, they will need to decide how much of their transfer budget they are prepared to use on the Brazilian midfielder. For Arsenal supporters, the most important thing to understand right now is that a rejected opening bid does not automatically mean that the transfer is finished. In many negotiations, the first proposal is simply the beginning. Arsenal have now shown Newcastle that they are interested. Newcastle have responded by rejecting the offer and making it clear that the proposal does not meet their expectations. The next step could therefore come from Arsenal. The Gunners could decide to improve the offer, or they could decide that Newcastle's demands are simply too high and move on to another target. Everything will depend on Arsenal's valuation of the player and Newcastle's willingness to negotiate. If Bruno Guimaraes is genuinely interested in joining Arsenal, then that could make the situation even more interesting. But it is important not to say that the player is definitely joining Arsenal at this stage. A transfer is only completed when the clubs reach an agreement, the player's terms are settled, and all the necessary formalities are completed. Until then, Arsenal supporters should treat this as a developing transfer story rather than a done deal. What we can say from the information available is that Arsenal have reportedly made an opening approach, Newcastle have rejected it, and communication between the clubs is continuing. So, Gunners, we could potentially be watching the beginning of a very interesting transfer battle. Arsenal want Bruno Guimaraes, Newcastle do not want to lose their captain, and there is currently a significant difference in valuation between the two clubs. If Arsenal decide to return with a much stronger offer, Newcastle will have a major decision to make. At the same time, Guimaraes' own position could become increasingly important, especially if he is attracted by the possibility of playing for Arsenal and competing for major trophies. For me, the biggest question is not whether Arsenal like Bruno Guimaraes. It is clear that there is serious interest. The biggest question is how much Arsenal are willing to pay to turn that interest into a completed transfer. Newcastle have already rejected the opening proposal, so Arsenal now know that they will have to improve their offer if they want to take this deal forward. And if the Gunners return with a much bigger bid, this story could become one of the biggest transfer battles of the summer. So, what do you think, Gunners? Should Arsenal push hard to sign Bruno Guimaraes, even if Newcastle demand a huge transfer fee, or should Arsenal walk away and focus on another midfielder? Let me know your opinion in the comments because I want to hear what every Arsenal supporter thinks about this situation. And if you enjoyed this Arsenal transfer update, don't forget to subscribe to Gunners Daily, turn on notifications, and join the family. We will continue bringing you the latest Arsenal transfer stories, rumours and updates as this summer develops. Come on, you Gunners.